I see y'all want a video on the Danish deception. Okay, I had just done a video. I've just uploaded a video about Brene and Tim on TikTok, and I thought it would be a little while before I venture back to some obscure drama off of TikTok that I have some thoughts about. But I was wrong, because I have been so bombarded with requests to talk about the Danish deception, which I had no idea what it was. My knee-jerk thought was, what the f is the Danish deception? I was under the impression that it was like a pastry that you thought would be sweet, and then there's meat inside, and you weren't mentally prepared for that. So it's like, it's fine, but you feel somewhat betrayed. That is not what it is. Apparently, it is a story, 25 plus part story, that has become quite the subject of conversation in the last few weeks. It seems to be getting progressively more popular as we get in a post who the f did I marry world. It is a story from a Nigerian American woman by the name of Onyeka, during which she breaks down the story of her ex-husband who swindled her and most of the people in her orbit out of large sums of money. Speaking of who the f did I marry, it is compared to that harrowing tale of lies and deceptions, and I have a video on who the f did I marry if you don't want to sit there for 8 hours going through all the parts. I have like an hour-and-a-half long video that breaks it all down. I was hearing the comparisons between this story and who the f did I marry, and part of the reason why that seems to be such a heavy comparison that's going forth as you walk into the Danish deception is because Onyeka herself compares the two in her introduction, even calls her story worse.
If you were a fan of the Who the Fuck Did I Marry series, unfortunately, the story you're about to hear is significantly worse, and it pains me to say that.
And I am correct that I am going into a story of lies, deception, deceit from her partner. He did objectively do those things. But this is not a who the f did I marry. Again, it is about scamming. She was lied to and predated on. But Onyeka doesn't seem to understand, one, that's very weird to compare your trauma stories like that. I just found that wording very particular. Like, mine's actually way worse. And I was like, don't like that. But again, staying open-minded. Again, this is, you know, a story, a harrowing one. And maybe she's right. I don't know. She's not. Her story is nowhere near as devastating as who the f did I marry. We'll get to that. But the core distinction between who the f did I marry and Danish deception is that in Who the F Did I Marry, Risa Tisa is very introspective, seems to understand the factors at play generally, as well as within herself, that participated in the story. She admits where she may have overlooked things and the places that she even played into her own deception because it was easier to accept the lie. And at the end of it, it is this triumphant tale of a person deciding to extricate themselves in this wild whirlwind they were forced into without their knowledge. This is not that. It is a story, again, of deception. But to be quite frank, Onyeka isn't self-aware enough to present the story in that way. There's a lot of setting up her as entirely uninvolved in the things that have happened through the course of this relationship, in the course of the scamming that went on. And again, she is a victim, and I don't want to discredit that being the case. But victims can be unlikable, and victims can be dumb. And unfortunately, Onyeka is both of those things. And I think because of that, a lot of people want my opinion on it. And so here we are. I assume this is going to be a very long video because, again, it's 25 parts, each of which are about 10 minutes, many of which didn't need to be that long. So that's the plan for today. But first, hi, it's Kendall here. New around here, welcome. Not new around here. What is up, home skillet biscuit? Before we get started, I did actually react to all of this for the first time on my Twitch, which should be linked down below. I don't know if the video will still be there by the time this video goes up. We'll see, but I did do it there. So feel free to follow me on NotKennieTV on Twitch, as well as become a member so that you can get prioritized in recommendations, as well as communication with me. I've also teased a little bit of merch over there. Let's send it over to Admiral Ahoy Kenny. Hello everyone, this is Admiral Kenny, and today's video is sponsored by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit delivery service that offers fresh, delicious, and healthy meals delivered straight to the comfort of your own home. They're pre-portioned, pre-thought out, pre-shopped for. If you're in recipe ruts, if you're just learning to cook in general, it's a great way to get some instruction because they have easy to follow recipe cards that allow you to get the meal on the table in about 30 minutes, often less than that. I have discovered some of my favorite flavors through HelloFresh, discovered bourbon brown sugar seasoning, as well as a new appreciation for certain protein and certain vegetables. I really didn't think you needed to put celery in anything. I was wrong. Celery does best. It just helps you think less when going into a meal. So you're like, what am I gonna cook? I have a HelloFresh. They also have great add-ons to make things even easier, like pre-cooked proteins, breakfast, snacks, desserts. And speaking of those add-ons, you can claim 10 free meals and free shipping if you use my code KennieFM using the link down below or the QR code somewhere floating around my bonnet. That's 1 free meal per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New and returning subscribers only. Varies by plan. Big thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery. Like I said, there's been a lot of discourse around this story. It does seem that the discourse around it is a little different depending on who is the group observing the story. I can only speak as a Black woman, Black American woman, because that's what I am. But there were a lot of signs early on. This, again, is a scamming story. But one of the things that our scammer is able to exploit and hone in on is some pretty glaring and obvious internalized anti-Blackness. I could feel it early, but I didn't want to say anything. But it becomes kind of ridiculous as the story goes along, and you can't help but say, I wonder what she'd be doing all this if it wasn't for a white dude. Would she do this for a Black dude? I highly doubt it. At risk of tainting the water as we go into the story, I just have to be upfront. That is one of the first things that I noticed about her. And I think it is important to use that to frame this story for what it is. Again, one of the distinctions between this story and Who the F Did I Marry is that Onyeka doesn't seem to understand that her story doesn't present as one-sided as she seems to think it does. And it makes people say, I'm trying to feel bad for you, but you sound kind of dumb. Like, that's what it boils down to. Bitch, are you dumb? I think you might be stupid. And you could say, you know, why does her story have to be palatable for us? Why does a victim's story have to be palatable for us? And my answer to that is it doesn't. But it does seem, again, that she wants it to. She's presenting this story as an opportunity to take the power back and to no longer be silenced by her ex. And I do think that's an important rallying cry. But again, I'm not entirely sure that's what this ended up being. If it is that, it's been obfuscated by some other things. And I'll leave that up to you to decide whether or not that is a negative or positive. The events of the story kind of just sounds like rich people being really bad with money and then coming to the internet expecting us to not ask questions about how we ended up here. And she is selling the story. She is marketing the story. She gave it the name, The Danish Deception. It's catchy. She starts off the story trying to sell it as a beautiful love story that ultimately takes a deep turn.
What you guys are about to hear is going to be one of the most beautiful love stories you've ever heard in your entire life. And for that reason, I need to make sure you guys all prepare yourselves because it's going to take a very drastic turn. And this is going to be one of the most insane roller coaster of emotions that you guys have been on.
And that is, again, worse than Reese teases, which is not. It's just not. It's just not that thing that she's saying. Being that she sets it up like that, it gives incredibly sheltered, incredibly naive to feel that the average American, especially nowadays, struggling to feed their family is going to cry over rich people being stupid. But alas, this is the story because here we are. I'm sorry. I feel like I've had to do a lot of caveats, and I do. But now that we've done that, let's get into the story of the Danish Deception. So Onyeka, there are a few things that we should know about her. She is a Nigerian American, 31. She works in real estate in Dallas, Texas. She was also once a contestant on The Bachelor. I ironically don't watch The Bachelor, even though I watch a lot of trash. According to the grapevine of those that did watch it, she seemed to be quite insecure, struggling with her self-esteem during that, which is not unusual. People do. And especially, I'd imagine, as a Nigerian woman who seems to have spent most of her life in predominantly white areas, that can really nick at the self-esteem, I'm sure, because it seemed like she was very much so wanting to seem desirable to men, which is very normal, very common, very much so a result of the way that women are socialized in general. And in her early mid-20s, that insecurity is being exploited on television. So, you know, that kind of sets you up for the experiences that Onyeka has had. Another thing to note is that at the beginning of this story, she has not been in a serious relationship. I am not going to judge her on that either, but it does come into play. Because for those of you that are more familiar with me, I had gone most of my life without being in serious relationships. Only within the last few years have I been in one. And that's its own learning curve, its own thing. So I'm not going to judge her entirely on not having that information. But there's certain information that I am perplexed that you don't have, just in general about life, you know. In her introduction, which a lot of people have said to skip, I recommend don't. Again, that's where she talks about comparing it to Reese Tisa and all that other stuff. And I feel like that does give you a taste for a little vibe that's in there. But during the introduction, she gives her reasons for why she is sharing this story. 1, to tell the world how love is a powerful drug that clouds your judgment and makes you think in ways that you wouldn't otherwise. Which, sure. She also wants to do this as a way of getting the word out there to protect people from her ex or others like her ex. Again, she starts off saying that you're going to hear the most beautiful love story that is going to take a turn, which it's a hook, I guess, whatever. She ends the introduction with a message directly to her ex in which she basically says that she isn't going to let him minimize her story or her power anymore. Okay. All right. Let's get started. June 2022. Onyeka goes on a trip. I'm laughing because one of the things that you're going to hear a lot is Onyeka went on a trip. Onyeka and her boyfriend went on a trip. Onyeka and her husband went on a trip. Onyeka and her friends went on a trip. It gets comical because they always go in somewhere. I want to just highlight that one thing they gonna do is go on a goddamn trip. So anyway, she's on a trip to Croatia. And while on the beach, she ends up seeing this very attractive man who, as she says, looks like he's straight out of a Calvin Klein ad.
And the first thing that came to my mind was, this man looks like he is walking straight out of a Calvin Klein ad. 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyes, chiseled skin, so tan, muscles everywhere. I was definitely taken aback.
Of course, people went to look him up. He's fine. I don't think he's as attractive as she was getting, but at the end of the day, attraction is very subjective, and also vibes make people attractive. I don't know. But I bring this up more so to point out the ways in which she describes him. She says he is 6'3", blonde hair, blue eyes, chiseled skin, whatever that means, muscular, tan. And again, these could just simply be descriptions, and they are. He is a blonde man with blue eyes. Dirty blonde, I think, is more accurate, but whatever. But she's a Nigerian woman, and the thing that she is finding attractive is his blonde hair, blue eyes. It paints a particular picture. Spoiler, we will be talking about race, but this is how she presents him to the audience, and immediately calls me pause. But she's like incredibly taken aback by how attractive this man is. She's like, oh my God, he's an Adonis. They end up sparking conversation. He buys her a drink. He's there with a friend, and him and the friend are both from Denmark. He currently lives in Copenhagen. The friend is from his hometown, which is about an hour outside of Copenhagen. Copenhagen, Denmark. She asks for their Instagrams, slyly trying to just get his. Eventually they end up chatting, talking to each other through DMs. They end up going out to dinner, her and her friend, and him and his friend. And while at dinner, Onyeka brings up kind of a sly game to get a feel for the type of women that this man likes. I'm gonna call him Denmark. Is that easier? Denny. I'm gonna call him Denny. She decides to start this game where essentially the best friends of each person has to describe what their friend's ideal type is. And Denny's friend lists off qualities that Denny likes. And Onyeka's friend says, well, that sounds like Onyeka. The only thing that she can't do is cook. And Onyeka turns to Denny and says, but I would become a great cook for a good man.
But I will become a great cook for a good man.
It's a little pick-me, just a smidge. And maybe it was just cute banter. It's like, oh, maybe I'd do it for the right person, you know. But it sounds like you're selling yourself a little bit. But she says that they have this electric connection. They both work in real estate and tech, so they both have that in common. After Croatia, they say their goodbyes, and she's off traveling, not expecting really anything to come from this mysterious meeting with this blonde hair, blue eye, 6'3" man. So she continues to travel. She goes to Barcelona, and weirdly enough, their conversation doesn't die out, which she kind of expected it to. That weekend, he would message her and ask her if she wanted to go to Ibiza, which she turns down, in part because she felt like he was the type of guy that gets everything easily, and she wanted it to be a little bit harder to get. You needed to put in work to be with me. But they keep talking, and eventually he brings up flying her out to Monaco. And I guess she didn't think too much about that when she was like, oh yeah, I'll go. This was the first major, I think this bitch is dumb. She sends him her passport photo so that he can get her flight. Bitch, what? Mind you, they don't even have each other's phone numbers. And this bitch done sent him her passport. Just a regular she met some time ago has her passport. And they've known each other, what, 2 weeks? But okay. She ends up talking about past relationships, and she would admit that, again, she hadn't been in a serious one. He would say that he had recently gotten out of a relationship about 4 months prior, and that relationship was about 4 years long. 4 months doesn't sound like long enough to get out of a 4-year relationship to me, but I guess it does depend on like how that relationship ended. You know, if you both kind of checked out by the end, usually it's easier to move on. They talk about their families, how close they are with them. He says he's very close to his family, all except his older sister, who had a history of being violent, he would say, towards his mother. So they keep talking over the course of the month that leads up to Monaco. And during this conversation, he would say something along the lines of, if we were to get married, you would meet the queen. The queen of what? I didn't know Denmark has a queen. I assume it's kind of like the British monarchy, where they're kind of there as more of a travel experience instead of like a mover of contemporary politics. Or if they do move contemporary politics, it's not in a overt way. I don't know anything about Denmark. I'm so sorry. Hello, my Danish people. Please inform me. I looked it up a little bit. So there is a person who is the queen, but I had to finish this video. But the point of this is that he's like, I'm royalty. My family is a part of something called the Order of the Elephants. And he sends her a website where she sees someone that she can garner is probably his great grandfather or something. That is some shit that is so Googleable. It's so Googleable that his great great grandson, the lineage of a monarch, would be online. But she just assumes, yeah, they got the same last name or whatever. Yeah, you know, she doesn't ask too many questions about it. She don't ask many questions at all. This entire story, and it's perplexing. But she says something along the lines like she thought it was too good to be true. And she says that overall she's a rather skeptical person, and I call bullshit. She don't Google shit this entire fucking story. We're here partially because she don't Google shit. Again, he sends her this website, but I'm sure there's a paper trail if the family is, you know, a fucking knight of the chivalry or whatever the She does end up going to Monaco and seems very like safe with this man in a way that's very concerning. She's a person that also looks for signs, it seems. And she ends up running to a friend at the airport on her way out. And she was like, oh, that's a good sign. You know, she's like very okay with going, not a whole lot of concerns. She thinks worst case scenario, this is a quote, worst case scenario, he is crazy and I have enough money to leave if I need to. Perplexing. As a woman, the idea that the worst case scenario is that a man is crazy as opposed to worst case scenario, he rapes and murders you. Like, it's really perplexing, honestly, to be that blasé as a Black woman in America. But okay. She don't watch true crime. Like, she does seem to have like negative self-preservation in a way that is really concerning. Again, not trying to victim blame. There are some like basic survival skills that she seems to not possess. She goes to Monaco, they see each other, they make out, they have a lot of sex, they have a great time. She goes with him to a work event and they travel across the south of France, go to Saint-Tropez. He buys expensive things, expensive hotel rooms. She looked that up. Didn't look up shit else, but she found out that room was $1,500 a night. Didn't look up in any real way if he was related to the queen, but okay. And she is overwhelmed by the sheer extravagance of the trip. One of the things early is that Onyeka frames it as like she doesn't want him to feel like she only wants him for his money. And to overcorrect for that, she has a lot of situations where she's basically saying, I don't need you to buy me things. I don't want you to buy those. I'm not that type of girl. I don't need all these things. I'll just take a $200 pair of glasses. Don't buy me this thousands and I don't want all this fanciness. I'm here for you. I can understand what she was trying to say, but it comes off more so like, I don't deserve these things. Don't give them to me. He's like, wow, you're cheap. That is a quote. And she's like, yeah, I'm just a simple girl. Again, kind of like, she doesn't say I'm not like the other girls, but there is this kind of, you know. And then over dinner, he just talks about how much he loves his family. And I guess, you know, within that, she's like, oh my God, I'm in love with this man. Apparently it's on her face. So she ends up professing her love to him through tears. He like grabs her face and he's like, tell me. And she's like, I think I'm in love with you. For some reason, he doesn't want to say it back. He wants to have his own special moment. Weird. And the moment he picks is when she is unconscious and covered in her own blood and urine. So they make their way to Kane's. That took a swift turn. I thought it was about to get true crimey. No. She just clumsy, apparently. I don't know. While at dinner in Kane's, she goes to the bathroom, trips on her dress, and next thing she knows, she's surrounded by people who are looking at her disconcertingly. She had been unconscious for about 10 minutes and had been having a seizure while on the ground. She was on her way to the bathroom. During said seizure, she would urinate herself. And as they're like getting her ready to go into an ambulance, this is when he decides to say, you know, I love you. Now, maybe it's because I watched too much true crime, but I thought he bonked her. I thought he bonked her on the head or drugged her or something. But no, she just tripped. I mean, we never come back to the story, so maybe he did something nefarious, but it does seem as she's retelling the story, she's more like hyperfixated on the fact that this man has been her boyfriend for 3 days and how embarrassed she was that he had to see her bleeding and urine soaked, which is perplexing. She was having several seizures and blood coming out of her head. Honestly, girl, you between this world and the next, I'm gonna need you to prioritize. She would have a concussion and need some eyebrow stitches, but the whole experience she sees as a sign that this is the man that God has sent me to keep me safe. Okay, I don't know. Okay. But once he gets back from the trip, it seems like he is just hit with a wave of bad luck. And this is also something that kind of permeates the story. It seems like every time she brings up news, it's always some bad news, right? Always coming with some bad news. She gets back from the trip. She goes to Dallas. He goes to Copenhagen. He calls her and tells her that there is a apartment complex that he would like to invest in. And he's kind of asking her, what do you think about it? And she's not particularly comfortable because they haven't been dating for very long. She's like, I don't know anything about that market, you know, but do what you feel is great. He does say that it'll take up a lot of his liquidity. And she's like, I support your decision, whatever that is. But again, she wanted to prove to him that she wasn't with him for the money. So this is when she starts saying like, you know, I can carry my side of the relationship financially. If you need me to pay for some more things around this, like, let me know. And I'm like, what? You a royal? What you need money for? What you need my real estate job money for? You know what I mean? But he's very like, no, I would never take your money. Absolutely not. He's like, I'll just move some stuff around before he can come and visit her in Dallas. So he comes to visit her in Dallas. They will go back and forth several times from Dallas to Copenhagen or from somewhere else to Copenhagen or from somewhere else to Dallas. And it gets very confusing, but they go on flights. Like I said, one thing they gonna do is they gonna go on a trip. So he comes to Dallas in September 2022. She welcomes him with a sign that says, welcome to Dallas, my Danish man. He don't have a fucking name. You couldn't put his name on the sign. I don't know. It just weirded me out because it goes back to there seems to be a hyperfixation on his whiteness, his foreignness. I wish I would come into an airport and somebody was like, welcome black, welcome my black woman. Like, what is my name? But anyway, she sees him, realizes, ooh, girl, I got it bad. She got it so bad. In that moment, on some real Bella Swan shit, she's like, this man has the power to destroy me. I feel bad because I laughed. I did laugh when I was like, bitch, what fucking mid-2000s supernatural romance have you read and kept on way too long, bitch? Let me be a bit more charitable. I do understand, again, as a person who's only in the last few years been in a serious relationship, there is something very vulnerable and exposed about that. And it's scary because you care about this person. They can hurt your feelings. You can hurt their feelings. You know, you want things to be understood and want to be safe to say what you feel and concerns you have and stuff like that. But that's not how I felt when she said, at least that's not how I took it when she said he could destroy me. It was very much so, this is the skin of a killer. But basically, they do a lot of fun stuff. She likes seeing him with her dog, and she's incredibly impressed that this white man can handle Nigerian spicy food. there was signs that she was like, he meets a bunch of her family and friends. And while he chats with her cousin, it comes out that Danny, what did I say I was going to call him? Danny? He says that he is a 2-time Olympian. He's a 2-time Olympian handball player with 2 medals, a bronze and a gold. But he downplays it because, you know, like, I was on the bench. I didn't even play. You know, I just kind of got the medal by default. It's no big deal. And she says much later in the story, like, she doesn't look into it because he downplayed it so much. So, like, why would I look into it? That's some Googleable shit. And I don't care how much he downplayed that shit. I want to see a picture of you at the Olympics, bitch. But she doesn't. She doesn't look it up. Supposedly. During this entire trip, he paid for everything. He paid for everything in Monaco, which is important to understand that this is the basis of their relationship in the beginning. He's buying everything. So he goes back to Denmark. They're both very depressed that they have to be away from each other. And he starts initiating a conversation about what they will do for the future. Mind you, they've been dating for like 2 or 3 months at this point, if that. So talking about what we're doing for the future as far as like where are we going to live sounds a little premature to me. And it also sounds premature that she offered, hey, if I have to, I will move to Denmark if necessary. He's like, no. You have everything in Dallas. My family isn't even in Copenhagen. They're hours away. So, you know, I want you to be near your family, which she is very relieved by. I don't know why you offered, but yeah, you do it sometimes. You're like, well, I can try. Like, no, you don't want to do that. October 2022, next month, he flies back to Dallas. That is an 11-hour flight. Minimum. I want to also keep that in mind that when they fly back and forth from Dallas to Copenhagen, that is at least 11 hours. Those are not short, like, oh, you know, it's 5-hour flight. You know, it's like going to California. No, those are long fucking flights. He comes and tells her some bad news. There are some foundation issues with the apartment he bought and that the repairs are going to cost $50,000. He says that he has most of it, but he's going to ask his father for a loan for the rest. Again, she understands that his royal title and family trust would insinuate some amount of money from his family, but apparently his father would refuse to give him a loan. So he calls Onyeka incredibly upset. He feels like he's been abandoned by his father, but he's like, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. And no, I won't take any money from you. I won't take any money from you because she's like, I can try to help you. Like, no, I would never take your money. But he's still stressed out as days go by. And so she offers to give him the rest of the money. Again, absolutely not. He keeps going down like, okay, now I need 20,000. Now I need 11,000. Now I need 6,000. And at 6,000, he's still reluctant. Like, no, I can't take your money. But I guess I'm really in a bind. I'll have to do the humble thing. Take up your offer. Basically, he says that he needs to stay in Copenhagen so that he can figure out everything with the apartment. And she's like, let me just give you the money so that you can come. And he's like, fine, I'll do the humble, honorable thing. I'll take your $6,000. And this is my issue with the storytelling. She doesn't sit there and say, now that we've had time away, I know more. I know the story. She doesn't even ask past her, why didn't we put 2 and 2 together? Like, you're a royalty, but you need $6,000? $6,000 is such a small amount of money in comparison to the millions and millions that his family and himself are professed to have. Why do you need $6,000 from a realtor in Dallas? It doesn't make sense to me. Best case scenario, you do have all this money and you do have all these things, but you're just bad with your money, which is also unattractive to me. Y'all don't get turned off by that are bad with money. Also, as we'll find out a lot, he seems to be an enjoyer of fine things, expensive wine, expensive traveling. He has hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of watches, expensive cars. Again, you're a f***ing royal. You work at a big tech / real estate job. You rent out 2 apartments and you're trying to own an apartment complex and you need to borrow $6,000? It doesn't make sense. $6,000 ain't nothing to scoff at, but he wasn't acting like he had a nice, comfortable job. He was saying he from money. Why are you struggling for $6,000? Honestly, you shouldn't have been struggling for the $50,000. Again, you come from money. And this is when I'm thinking as I'm listening to the story, oh, he's bad with money. Again, best case scenario, actually has all this money, but as soon as it's in his fingers, it's out of it, which is unattractive to me. I find it very unattractive to be bad with money. I'm a Capricorn. I'll use that as my excuse. So either that or he gambles, or he doesn't make nearly as much as he says he does. Something's not right here. But Onyeka doesn't ask that question and doesn't give us a great reason for why she doesn't ask that question. Just basically says, well, he said he's a businessman and he needs, he's a business dude and he feels bad. So, I'm helping him out. I want to contribute. I don't want to be a gold digger. I don't. Again, he had picked up everything up until this point. So she's like, I want to play my part. He comes to Dallas and he's like complaining of back pain. And once he returns to Copenhagen, he's saying that this back pain is also getting worse. During this time, she would go to Charlotte to visit a friend and learn a bunch of different things. His back is getting way worse. He may need to get surgery. His father is also in the hospital. Now, when I heard the father, I was like, is that fake? Does he not have a sick father? He actually does have a sick father. His father would eventually be diagnosed, I believe, with leukemia. So that's incredibly unfortunate. But throughout the 3 years they're together, the father's health would go back and forth, and it would be really rough. He comes back to Dallas. This is the third time in like 3 months he's been to Dallas. And mind you, he has not paid her that $6,000 yet. I looked it up. A business seat, which if I understood correctly was what he always wanted to fly. I get it though, because I'm tall. He's 6'3". It's really rough being in economy and you're 6 foot or higher. It really is. But I looked up the price of tickets from Copenhagen to Dallas. And as of right now, a business class seat is $3,000 round trip. But whatever. She says she's not bringing up the money. She doesn't care about the money. It's not important. She's worried about his back and his father and all that. She's like, I'm focusing on you because I love you. Which, okay. This visit, he meets a lot of her Nigerian community. She holds a gala that she's on the board of, or of some Nigerian, what is that, community organization of some sort. And he helps her with the gala and she's just so impressed by him. Everybody seems to really like him. He's dancing to Afro beats and she doesn't really say a whole much about how she reaches this conclusion. But for some reason, him being able to get along with people and dance to Afro beats and help her put up a gala was so much evidence that he was invested in her culture and that he took her culture seriously, which is wild. Maybe it's because I grew up a K-pop fan, but I've seen K-pop doing black shit all the time and can't stand black people. What do you mean? They'll do some black shit and then call you a in the same breath. Like, what are you talking about? All he did is shimmy to some Burner Boy and eat Jollof. Bitch, what are you talking about? But her parents really liked him and that was very affirming, I'm sure. And he brought up the medals again, saying, you know, he donated the bronze medal and the gold he gave to his mom so he doesn't have them. Right. And instead of, again, questioning that, maybe Googling it, she's just like, wow, he's so generous and humble. Wow, this man is amazing. During that visit, he would stay until, if I'm not mistaken, he would stay until Thanksgiving. During Thanksgiving, Onyeka's father would bring up how they're going to be having a funeral for her grandmother, so his mother, in Nigeria in May. And Denny invited himself. To this, Onyeka was mildly horrified that this white man wanted to come to Nigeria, basically feeling the need to like warn him. Like, this is not a cute little tourist location where we can, you know, hang out and then go to a hotel. Like, this is a village. We're going to a village. Are you prepared for that? It isn't developed. You know that, right? And he's like, I don't care. I want to go. And again, that made her feel that much more affirmed and seen and accepted. And it saddens me. Like, it's so easy to dunk on her for being naive, which again, she is. But also it does go to show how lowly one must think of themselves and their own culture, regardless of, she says a lot about like, I am Nigerian. I'm proud of being Nigerian. I love being Nigerian. But everything she says about how she interacts with being Nigerian, how she reacts around being black, shows the opposite. It shows a certain level of maybe protection that she has over it, but part of it is like embarrassment. And if someone sees or observes, perceives her Nigerianness and doesn't overtly say, ew, get away from me, that feels like acceptance when it's just a neutrality. And I know that that comes from trauma. I don't believe that comes out of nowhere. I'm sure, again, a Nigerian woman in a predominantly white area has had a lot of rejection, undoubtedly, to that. But in response, she's now with this blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man, and she feels the need to warn him that if you go to Nigeria, you're dirtying your whiteness with Nigerian soil. I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but with everything else coming together, it does make sense. She is impressed that he's talking to her family, that he can handle spice, that he danced to Afro beats, and is considering to go to Nigeria. Those aren't feats. He didn't do something very difficult. That's like baseline. Those are the things that made her say, this man sees me. And that just disheartens me. If that's all it takes to be considered considerate, then you'll take anything. Like, honestly. So within 4 months, they were talking about marriage in a concrete way. He was talking about buying her a ring. So it's now Christmas 2022. And originally they had planned to go to Brazil. Didn't plan to give me back $6,000, but okay. Instead, they decided to not do that because he's complaining of his back pain. The doctors were saying that he had 2 herniated discs and he would need to get surgery. So she offered instead to come and take care of him during this time, but he refused, saying he didn't want this to be the first time she comes to Denmark, didn't want her taking care of him during that time, didn't want to have to be in that situation for her to meet his family. And this really upset her because she felt like he wasn't treating her like his family. They were already talking about marriage, but I can't come and take care of you during a serious surgery. It's strange. But again, they've only been together for 4 months. So I'm not surprised that things feel weird. So instead, she goes to New York City with her friend, and he says that after the surgery, he's expected to walk around for some reason. That sounds like an invasive surgery that you got to walk around after. So he says, after the surgery, a few days after, how about you come to Copenhagen then? I did look that up. Apparently that is pretty common. It's pretty true that you should be walking around after a hernia surgery, but I don't know if you're supposed to walk around that quickly. I don't know. So he's worrying about that, but he says, come anyway. So she was supposed to come after the hernia surgery, but his father ends up going to the hospital again, and he doesn't want her to come again first time in Copenhagen, and it's just taking care of people who are sick. So instead, he tells her to have fun in the States, and she hangs out with her friend in New York and Boston instead. He later tells her that he got in a fight with his older sister at the hospital where his father was because she had the nerve to ask him where he was spending Christmas, to which he responded, "Not with you, bitch." Apparently he said it like, "Not with you, bitch," but I can't help but hear it as, "Not with you, bitch." There's something very about it. And also so unnecessary because what? He calls Onyeka telling her how he stormed out and how he felt so disrespected, which is crazy because all she did was ask you where you spending Christmas and you the one that said, "Not with you, bitch." Again, in a way that I find progressively strange with Onyeka. She responds talking about how disrespectful his older sister is. I'm sure he told her a whole story about how terrible she is, but we don't hear it. So all we hear is him calling her a bitch and then Onyeka being like, "Yeah, why is she so awful?" Regardless of how rough their background is, maybe there is something triggering there. But regardless, it seems like a hot response to a simple question of where you're spending Christmas. But okay. I also note that Onyeka doesn't seem to find his response out of pocket. Instead, she's like siding with him unwaveringly, saying, "My God, why is she so terrible? Like, why is she so awful?" And I'm like, okay. So after this argument, he wants to get away because one thing they're not going to do is stay at home. So he's like, "I'm mad. Let's go to Paris on a bad back. When you owe me $6,000, okay, that's a lot of walking. I know you're supposed to walk at least a little bit, but that's a lot of walking you got to do. And a lot of not giving me $6,000. And now, wanting to go to Paris, suddenly he can't access his money from his Denmark account, can't move over to the something account. So he asks his mom for a loan, and to which she denies. And unless he spends more time with the family, and he doesn't want to do that, and yada, yada, yada. So he gives a lot of vague information about family drama and how he can't pay something because his Danish account, whatever. And she's like, "Okay, I'll pay for Paris." How did I get stuck paying for a trip that you decided to go on? And you still owe me $6,000. And she still isn't asking where that money is, though. Interesting. He's always had some bad news, always something going on. So I guess she didn't want to do that. You still owe me $6,000, even though your daddy dying. I understand it's a rough time, but you still owe me money. So they go to Paris and he asks about how she feels about talking to an immigration attorney for him. You know, should start getting the process going for him to have a green card. Again, they met 6 months ago and she's like, "Yeah, that sounds amazing. Like, it's amazing." So they reach out to an immigration lawyer and she tells them that essentially it could take about 18 months starting from when they get married to get a green card, which as far as I know, I've had friends who had to do the whole process. It is that. It's very involved. And so in January, having met 6 months ago, they decide to get married because they want that clock to go quicker. So they get married. He decides to sell his place in Copenhagen at a loss, but he was able to get $500,000 supposedly. But soon after that, they are having more issues with that apartment that he's trying to buy. Something about electrical issues, structural issues, no one has power. And he says that he's used up all the money that he has to fix it. So now he just outright asks her for $5,000. This is the first time he's explicitly asked for that, to which she agrees. He now owes her $11,000. They've gone to Paris since he's owed her, and they've attempted to buy a natural diamond since he's owed her, and he's still a royal and an Olympian and has this incredible tech real estate job, but you owe me But he swears that once everything with this apartment thing gets settled and after everything closes on that house that he's selling, he'll be able to pay her back by the end of January. But before we think about that too much, they got to plan a wedding, which again, he has no money. Maybe wedding plan to give me my fucking money. But despite asking $11,000 from her, they've gone to Paris. He's looking at natural cut diamonds. They're planning a wedding, and soon we'll find out they'll plan two. One that will be in Portugal and one that will be in Nigeria for the traditional side of the family. But again, you need $11,000 from me. Around the time that they're thinking about planning weddings and all that, suddenly now he needs $250,000 to give to a friend so he can buy out something, investment, something. And he asked for her advice. You know, should I do this? Should I not do this? And she's like, if you think it's a good investment, you should do it, which is crazy because where do you have $250,000 to invest in a friend when you still owe me $11,000? And again, she is not asking that question. She has yet to ask, even in this retelling where time has passed and she hasn't said like, I was asking myself, where is the money? But okay, I'll ignore it. Or, okay, I wanted to ignore it. I just decided to ignore it. No, she's just like, okay. They get married in a courthouse in January 2023 in Dallas. So he had to fly from Copenhagen to Dallas again. I assume she paid for that. They go on a honeymoon in Oklahoma, which at least isn't out of the country. They save some money that way. He goes back to Denmark, closes on that house, gave $250,000 to that friend, and he tells her, I'm gonna be able to get you your $11,000 back. But weirdly enough, time passes and suddenly, I guess I can't do that for some reason. Weird. And what luck, because he always has some bad news, because soon after this, after not being able to pay her back $11,000, he finds out that the Danish IRS is saying that he owes $318,000 and his father owes $12 million in taxes. Now, he claims that this is because someone in his CPA or something at his accounting firm or whatever, somebody's doing fraud, which is possible, but you seem to have a lot of bad fucking luck. So at this point, he decides to sell his 2 Rolexes and one other random, very expensive watch. You may be asking, because I was, why is he just now selling these fucking watches? You had a $50,000 bill come in. You asked for $11,000 from me. We went to Paris. You owe a friend $250,000 and you're telling me you own nearly $300,000 in watches and I still have not seen my $11,000 back. But again, she's like, I trust him. I didn't ask any questions. I know. Love can blind and whatever. But what is wrong? This isn't just being in love, bitch. This is being stupid. She might be kind of stupid. And if not outright stupid, she's lying. She's lying that something wasn't clicking. Something wasn't clicking, but she just decided to ignore it. Either way, damn, bitch. He would also reach out to friends of his who apparently owe him money. And then he asks for Onyeka to give him the remaining $15,000 for that tax bill. This is the biggest amount in one sitting that he's asked her for. And again, he still has not paid her the $11,000 that he owes her. So she's finally like, I don't know. I have to pay my taxes. My taxes are coming up soon. Like, this is a lot. She does give it over to him because his final appeal to her was that if he doesn't get this tax situation figured out, he may not be able to get a green card. And that made her panic. So she gave him the money over. So she pays him $26,000. And at this point, it is really starting to become a big financial strain, as you can imagine, because $26,000 ain't nothing to scoff at, especially when he's supposed to be a royal. Later that month, he flies back to Dallas. He is bonding more with her parents. He asks her father officially for her hand in marriage, even though little do they know they're already married. But while hanging out, staying with her parents, suddenly has more bad news. One of the friends that he had borrowed from to get his tax thing figured out called him freaking out, saying that now he doesn't have enough money to put a down payment on this house that him and his wife want, and he needs his money back. Why did you loan out money that you didn't have? Rule of thumb, never loan out money that you need. If you would hurt to to not have it back, don't give it to nobody. If you need it, don't give it. But alas, he's like, well, my wife is going to be so upset at me. Can you please give me some of the money back? And who had to pay for that? Onyeka, $3,000 back. She is now given this man in some way or another, accumulatively $29,000, $18,000 of which was in the month of March alone. After that, they go to Cabo. One of her friends is having a wedding in Cabo, and she said, okay, let's go to Cabo. Around this time, she started to become Instagram official with him, and she starts to get a lot of people that presumably know him in Denmark following her story. And she does find it a little weird. And after looking at some things, she's able to put two and two together that one of the people looking at her story is his most recent ex. They broke up 4 months before they met, supposedly. She does find it weird that she's looking at her stories. And he basically says, they're really salty that I left Denmark and I'm moving on. And they're all kind of toxic, honestly. You should block all of them. Not a great sign. Your partner is telling you that you have to block people from his past. So they go to Cabo, come back to Dallas, and then they go to Denmark. This is her first time in Denmark. This is Onyeka's first time in Denmark. This is her first time finally meeting his family and his friends, and they are very accepting. They're very welcoming. She does notice that his home, his parents' home, is quite humble for multi-millionaire royalty or whatever which isn't a red flag by itself, but combined with all the other things, everything is going well until all of a sudden her husband now, Denny, is now arguing with his father. But it's in Danish, so she doesn't understand exactly what's going on. But he's very upset. He storms out. The reason they were arguing isn't really that important. It's something along the lines of he felt like dad wasn't putting in enough effort to get to know Onyeka. But what it all boils down to is that this is her starting to notice that there is tension in his family. He's not as close to his family as he presented himself to be. He gets along with his mother, but that's about it. Everyone else seems to be quite strained. And then that oldest sister really don't with him. That was in his hometown, which again is a few hours outside of Copenhagen. So then they go to Copenhagen and he bitches about how they have to get a cheap hotel there, which is crazy because again, you owe me $30,000, bitch. Shut the fuck up. While in Copenhagen, he goes to one of his storage units where he is able to find another fucking watch, this time a Rolex that is worth nearly $50,000. And again, for some reason, she doesn't ask, why do you own this when you owe me nearly $30,000? Instead, she asks why he brought it up. And apparently he wants to bring it to their trip to Nigeria. She better than me because of all the questions I could have asked. This was not the one I would have. When I say she's better than me, I am wrong. Because instead she says, don't bring that to Nigeria. You're asking to get robbed. Now, I do agree. Bringing a $50,000 watch to Nigeria is asking to get robbed, but that's because bringing a $50,000 watch anywhere is asking to get robbed, in my opinion. I've never understood the appeal of wearing something like that is so expensive. With the state of affordability in the United States, you walk in anywhere in this bitch with a $50,000 guillotine on your wrist and you expect to not get robbed. Hey, pores, look at this on my, sound like a that don't care about his safety in general. The same way her ass doesn't seem to. But to talk about specifically Nigeria as the place to get robbed does again lean more into those suspected, the shame that she feels like, no, you're not going. You're going to Nigeria, the bad place, the one I'm from. Come on. They go to Nigeria for the grandmother's burial. And again, for some supposedly broke, y'all were the most travelingest, brokest I've ever seen. She says that despite the financial strain, she was very comfortable in some job that she was doing. She made $150,000. And then on top of that, she was a real estate agent. And all this taught me is that $150,000 down south can go far. Don't let being broke stop you from balling out. $150,000 a year, that's a cute vacation or two a year like a reasonable person. Y'all wild as considering at this point, again, she's been playing for most of this traveling. I think on this trip in particular, he paid for a lot. I argue probably because he wanted to seem like the breadwinner in front of her family. He bought the flights to Nigeria and the hotel and stuff like that. And she bring this white man around her Nigerian family and they're just like, oh my God, I love a white man. Oh my God, let me take a picture of you and the white man. While there, he says that there has been a tax settlement from the accounting firm and he'd be able to finally pay her back once that comes through. They've settled whatever fraud thing they thought thought was happening with his account. They go back to Denmark, and then they find out that a wealthy family whom he doesn't know who they are is interested in buying the apartment complex that was on his hands and causing him so much stress. However, for some rich person reason, supposedly, both him and the buyer would have to add money into escrow, which for him would be $120,000. Now, again, they have no money, supposedly. So he like, I'm going to go to the bank and get $100,000 loan. She's like, I'm running out of savings. And then kind of, I assume, alluding to her paying the balance of that $20,000. But she's like, I don't have anything to give you. I'm running out of everything. So instead, he's like, okay, I'll like ask around and I'll be able to come up with the money. Also, he says he wants to switch his account from Copenhagen to Dallas so that he can pay less in taxes. But considering he does not live in Dallas, he visits a lot, but he does not live in Dallas. For once, Onyeka is like, isn't that tax evasion? And he's like, no, it is not tax evasion. But I was kind of proud of her for even asking. It shouldn't have taken this long, but she did eventually ask, is that tax evasion? With that said, I'm pretty sure it is. He does not have a permanent address in the United States at this point. And if he's doing it to save money on taxes, that sounds like tax evasion to me. Oh, the people buying the apartment. That deal is going to be settled in 6 weeks. So let's take a trip to celebrate. One thing he's not going to do is stay home, baby. Y'all can't have dinner at home. She's like, we don't really have any money. And he's like, put it on your credit card. It's fine. And she does it. That's another thing that pisses me off about this. She talks about how manipulative he is, but she also never presents a situation in which she says, no, let's not travel. Let's don't go somewhere. We don't have the money. All she says is some crazy bad thing that happened to him. Suddenly he needs $1 million. And she's like, okay. And then we went to Amsterdam. Like, what the f? And also what is perplexing to me that she does not consider this. He supposedly and verifiably works for a company that pays him like $400,000 a year. So his legitimate job pays nearly $500,000 a year. I don't know how she proved that, but sure. Which to me begs even more of the question. If you're making nearly $500,000 a year just from your job, we're not talking about your real estate, your investments, yada, yada. You're making $400,000 a year just from work. Why are you constantly asking for money? Why are you constantly asking for money? Why are you constantly lacking money? Again, best case scenario, you're just really bad with money, which is not a good scenario for it to be the best. $50,000 watches, nice car, designer things, always trying to buy stuff, always going somewhere, and you don't have any f***ing money. And she's still not asking that question. Is being bad at money not an ick for y'all? It is for me. Because why are you trying to buy me Chanel and then asking me for $11,000? Like, that don't make you go, ew? That don't make you go, ugh? Because it makes me go, ugh. But that's because I'm a Capricorn, maybe. Or I just, I'm very particular. I find it, I'm confused. Even stupider in the middle of these financial problems. She would start complaining about her job. And that's not the stupid part. She's working remotely. The stupid part is that he says to her, why don't you quit and do real estate full time? Mind you, they have no f***ing money. She's the only person supporting them. And now you want her to basically start freelancing in the middle of that. And I'm sitting there like, telling me to quit my job while actively stressed about money, and you don't have any way to support me because you're bad with money apparently, and you always need a handout for me. And it's like, why even suggest this to her? Because if it was just about the money, this is cutting off your supply, right? I think part of it is like, he likes the notion of being able to provide. He likes the notion or the idea of being able to handle things, but takes no time to actually consider whether or not he can handle it. But regardless, she quits her job. She said she doesn't regret it because she did not enjoy the job, and that's fine. Quit your job if you don't like it and you feel the need to go elsewhere. That's totally fine. Doing it in the midst of bad financial times is probably not the best idea. Speaking of which, they then go to Portugal and back to Denmark and then back to Dallas. And now Onyeka has nothing. She actually is going into debt. That doesn't stop them from going to Miami soon after that. Then back to Denmark in August, during which she finds out that the Danish IRS has flagged the purchase of the apartment complex that they were supposed to be doing. And now there is a hearing date for September. Now, this makes absolutely no sense to me because she doesn't really go into specifics. And honestly, nothing makes sense this whole story. So whatever. He's supposedly going to have a hearing about that apartment complex. She's starting to get frustrated because after all of this shit, they are, shocker, struggling. During this trip, his father gets sick again. He decides to stay back in Denmark to take care of that and work stuff while she goes back to Dallas. He has the hearing. It goes badly. They decide to put a hold on his accounts while they investigate his business account. They have another hearing in October for his personal account. So while this is happening, the Danish IRS is only allowing him to have $4,000 a month. Otherwise, she is financially supporting them completely. Now, 2 people living in the South, 4K, no kids. It's not crazy money by any means, but it's certainly a livable wage. They're acting like it's a penny, like, oh, we have nothing. Like, you can definitely make some with that shake, especially because it's only going to be for a limited amount of time. But he comes back to Dallas again around October, and luckily they open up his personal account and he's able to finally pay her $9,000. If you recall, not including flights, hotels, or anything else she's been paying for all of these trips, he still owes her $20,000. But he says that the money he has to pay the rest of that is in his business account that has been locked by the IRS until his hearing in January. Again, she has now quit her job. And for once, he has to support her a little bit because she has to get her real estate career off the ground. And he just told her to quit her job. December 2023 comes around and it's time for him to leave the US because his 90 days are up. While back in Denmark, his father goes back to the hospital. And right before she's supposed to come and visit him for Christmas, he gets more bad news. That's the bad news in this having this I've ever been to, where now he's been hit with 2 giant insurance payments for his 2 apartments that he rents out, and he's wiped out again. They don't have payment plans. They don't let you know well enough advance that you have a payment due, my dude. You own supposedly so many properties. Why are you being shocked? She don't ask, why am I? Well, actually, no, that's not fair. This is actually her first time fully questioning him because, again, there always seems like there's something wrong. But instead, she's like, well, I don't really want to say too much because it's the holidays. She does end up in Denmark and she ends up chatting with the friend that was with him when they met. That friend is asking them to go out to a party. You know, Danny's like really not wanting to go, which is odd because he always wants to go out. He always wants to flex. He always wants to, you know, be the life of the party. And she's like, wow, that's really strange, actually, that he doesn't want to go out. And the friend is like, oh yeah, it's probably because he doesn't want to run into any of his enemies from his past gambling addiction. Aha! You would have gotten to this realization quicker if we had asked just a few more questions. Y'all knew each other 6 months and you got married. That's not good. So she's stunned and the friend is confused and then gets angry because he was under the impression, because that's what Denny had said. He had lied to his friend and said that he had told her. So instead, she gets the lowdown from the friend. He had owed money to the friend, but he has since paid him back. But his addiction was really bad, particularly 10 years ago. She's like, oh my God. So she goes to confront him and she's like, do you have a gambling addiction? And he's like, I was an addict, but that's when I was really young and dumb and stupid and I would never gamble away your money. Fundamentally, a misunderstanding of what addiction is and what being an addict is. And if you fundamentally misunderstand what those things mean, you're most likely not going to be able to do the things that are necessary to try to even begin to stay sober. And 2, it's wild that you didn't fucking think to tell her this shit, though not surprising. You can't scam if you give them a heads up. So, but she's understandably very hurt and upset. And as naive as she's been up until this point, she still doesn't deserve to be lied to and predated on. I want to make that very clear. They go back and forth. He's like, do you really think I'm the type of person that would gamble away your money? And she's like, well, no, because she's like, I had never saw him lie to me at this point. So I didn't know. I didn't catch him in a lie prior to this. And I'm like, I did. Could have been a lot of them. Like a quick Google would have. Okay. But she's basically like, don't lie to me again. So they go to Budapest that New Year's Eve. One thing, again, they gonna do is go on a trip. They gonna be broke, but they gonna be broke in an aircraft. When they are both back home, he has the Danish IRS hearing for his business account, which ends up getting frozen for 18 months. Hey-o. Again, she doesn't seem to have much information on the particularities on why they're freezing his shit, but they're freezing it to investigate and he won't be able to get any of the business funds for 18 months. He did seem to have some documents to support this, though he does indeed have to translate it for her, which I wouldn't trust him to do that, but he has some shit to handle in Denmark. Once they get back together in Dallas, because of course they are, 11-hour flight, bitch. They doing it like it's across the fucking street. They stay there for a bit. They have a nice nice dinner instead of leaving to Mars for once or whatever. But the problem is, even when in Dallas, he still has to pay some crazy amount for dinner. So they have an anniversary dinner and he feels the need to spend $800 on dinner, part of which was the result of a $400 bottle of wine. What is in it? A drop of sweat from Jesus's ass? I've had expensive wine. The shit tastes fine. Tastes like wine. A $40 bottle of wine and a $400 bottle of wine don't taste that different to me. They're fine. But sure, in the midst of all this financial strife and up and down, some days they have money, sometimes they don't. Yeah, let's spend $800 on dinner. Jesus. I've never spent more than like on a very, very good dinner, very nice dinner. I've never spent more than maybe $300. And that's for like 4 or 5 people as well. No. I spent $500 one time for a birthday dinner and there were like 8 people there. I don't understand. Okay. I had to change locations because the sun is going down. I've been talking about this for so long. The sun has started to set. So they run into some of her friends while they're out at this anniversary dinner and they're at a cocktail bar and he decides to buy the entire group shots. Again, they just had an $800 fucking dinner. And then they're at this pretty swanky cocktail bar and he's trying to buy all these people drinks and he doesn't even know any of these people. He also starts getting really drunk, buying like 3, 4, 5 old fashions. He's starting to slur. He's talking to the women at the table and he accidentally like spittles onto one of her friends. He's like sloppy drunk and she sees him ordering another drink and she's like, hey, do you think maybe you should slow down? This would drive him up a wall at the sheer mention of how much he was drinking. And then this like snowballs into some argument about how she doesn't respect him, how he's the man and yada, yada, yada. And it's all this bullshit. And it becomes this giant fight where he decides to leave out, stay in a hotel for the night. One that was $1,000. Did a key card come with a hand job? What the And then in the morning, we'll see where we stand. They end up forgiving each other, but she doesn't understand why he's been acting this way. A few days pass. A friend would reach out to her to let her know that her husband, Denny, had borrowed $200,000 from their family. For the story, Onyeka calls this friend's husband Crypto, so that's what I'm going to call him. So she calls Onyeka, tells her that Danny had borrowed $200,000 from Crypto. Apparently he had told him some bogus story about why he needs the money, something about reselling watches, yada, yada, yada. But he hasn't given us the money back. Something also about Crypto, which is why his nickname is Crypto. Crypto also found out that the wallet that he sent the money to originally is connected to a gambling site, and it has been for a while. She confronts him, and of course he tries to deny it at first, but eventually he does admit that it's true. He's now in relapse. They now understand that. And so she tries to support him by doing all the things, going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings. She was reading up a lot on gambling. I'm not an expert on the subject of addiction either, but it does seem that she genuinely doesn't have a real understanding of addiction in general, because she seems to think that if she puts things a certain way, then he's no longer an addict. That's the vibe I get. Like, she doesn't understand it. It really is as cut and dry as some people are addicts and some are not. And if you are an addict, it is something that you need to be mindful of and accepting of and understanding of in order to manage it. I also want to say this, him having a gambling addiction or an addiction of any sort does not eliminate you from the concept of having a loving relationship. It doesn't. But just like with any illness, there are certain levels of management. And the thing is that Danny was denying that he had a problem still. He was pushing it away from himself. That was back 10 years ago. He didn't seem to have ownership over it, so he certainly wasn't going to take the initiative to manage it. If there was any managing happening, it was because Onyeka was kind of down his throat about it, and they were going to Gambling Anonymous meetings together. Eventually, Crypto would reach out to Onyeka again and say, hey, would you like me to hire a PI to look into his past? And she says yes. So there's a few things they find out. One, he doesn't have a criminal history, which is a relief. Two, I shouldn't laugh. I'm trying not to laugh. That's not good. I shouldn't laugh. But it's funny. He didn't go to the Olympics. She says again that she didn't look it up because of how he downplayed it, so she didn't think to do so. Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit, bitch. I refuse to believe she was foolish enough to just assume that that was true, but apparently she was still greatly believing it. She assumed he went to the Olympics. She does reverse image search on some of the photos that she had gotten from him that would show like the apartments that he owned or the ones that he was renting out, and they were all from a interior designing website. Those were not his apartments. So she confronts him. She's like, "Did you go to the Olympics?" And he tries to lie about it, and he's like, "Okay, yeah, no, I didn't go to the Olympics." And then she's like, "I also know that you took these photos from online." So as upset as she is, for some reason, she still doesn't want to leave him. She's like, "I believe that this is the enemy against him. This is the disease against him." And again, I know what they mean in the sense that the addiction is a disease in and of itself. But in the same way as like a Reggie Kelly steal, that video that I was talking about, it did seem that for Onyeka, it was easier to blame it on this nebulous enemy instead of acknowledging that your husband has no desire or plans to change in any way. And you can't do it for him, but she'll learn the hard way. They go to Colombia. They set up a payment plan to pay back Crypto the money that he had borrowed, and he was going to Gambling Anonymous. So she was like, "Oh, and we're saving up money and stuff, so let's spend it," I guess. I get the sense that she thought he was pretty much cured, which is crazy. He was making a lot of money from work, but it seems that he was spending it as soon as he got it, because yeah. But before the trip, she said she didn't want to go unless they sat down and apologized to Crypto and his wife. So he does that. He gives them this whole sob story about how, he's a slave to his addiction. And again, understanding kind of what he's talking about, but he doesn't seem to understand that he does play a part in his recovery, and separating himself from it and disentangling and distancing himself from it doesn't bode well for the prospect of being in a good financial standing, but I digress. But one thing, again, they're going to do is go on a fucking trip. So they go to Colombia. This is where he proposes to her for the first time officially. In the midst of the proposal, the thought is harrowing. The thought of being proposed to, and he basically says, "Yeah, I know this isn't what you'd wanted, but thank you because I'm terrible and you great and you accept me." And so she takes the ring, and her words are, not mine, these are her words. She had no reservations at all accepting, no hesitation. You make scamming look easy. Why be on the up and up? I could be. But she's like, "We're fixing our finances," and he's not lying to me anymore. Like she'd be able to catch it. He's still going to GA meetings and everything is great. So why not? In May, they go to Panama. But once they land in Panama, they find out that his father has passed away. Again, he had been sick for a while, going back to the hospital, back and forth. And so as awful as that was, it is now time to go back to Denmark for the funeral. They go to Denmark for the funeral. They come back to Dallas. And this is where she finds out that his work visa or something was approved. Now he can get a bank in the United States, which is important. He ends up opening a Chase Bank, which is the bank that she also banks with. Mom comes to visit them in Dallas, and then they go to Key West together. While there, Onyeka finally brings up, "You still owe me $20,000. And he's like, "Oh, of course. Yeah, I'll get it to you." But that doesn't happen. So finally she gets to snooping. And one day she catches him while her mother's in town, so she can't really confront him head on, but she catches him on a gambling site. She texts him as to not alert her mother that she sees him. His excuse later is that the gambling site is the only place for him to watch sports for free. Nothing you do is for free. You think the gambling site is making money showing people free? Oh, and you think I'm stupid and that don't bother you, bitch? He think you dumb. And unfortunately, a quick Google search shows you that you can't just go on a gambling site and watch sports for free. That's not how that works. You have to have an active account. You have to be betting on specific events. You can't just watch sports for free. But she doesn't look that up. But she does ask for his bank statement. She does something. She goes through it and she doesn't see anything, saying that, "No, I didn't see anything, so I better not see anything." And she still hasn't gotten that $20,000, by the way. There's always some excuse. Something about the Danish account, something about it's weird that it's not working. It's so crazy. There's always something wrong with the Chase account and the Danish account. That's just weird that they don't mesh for some reason and I can't get my money. It's so weird. She starts to get suspicious about everything when he goes to the bank and she's like, I'm gonna do a little test. If he doesn't want me to come inside with him, then he's hiding something. So she goes to get out of the car. He's like, no, babe, I'll be quick. You don't have to come in. And she's like, finally, them gears are rusty, but they'll get to going. He leaves out after going into the bank, and for some reason, he can only give her $1,000. So she's now gotten $10,000 of that $29,000 that she has loaned him, not including, again, all these trips that she is paying for, most likely, pretty much entirely. She finally gets angry that there's always something, and the fact that she has to financially carry their entire relationship. He has the nerve to get mad at her for bringing it up. They have a big fight where he shuts her out, and while he sulks away from her, she gets his bank card, leaves out and finds the ATM to check his balance, which is 34 cents. I didn't even know they keep the account open at that point. If you got 34 cents, if he talk about buying Chanel and having 2 weddings and he can't rub 2 quarters together. Next day, she confronts him about the bank balance. She says, I've seen it. Don't lie to me. You're gambling. I know you're gambling. Eventually, she would start going through his Danish phone where she would find immediately one of the gambling websites that he was on. And she would see these like crazy bets. He was betting large amounts at a time, which is also particularly wild. It was like $5,000 per bet. She confronts him about it again, and he keeps lying about it. And for her credit, she does tell him to get out if he's going to keep lying to her. Like, goddamn, because eventually shit. But admittedly, she admits she still wants to be with him. Again, she's seeing it as he's being afflicted, but it's getting really hard. And so she sits him down, and this is the first time that she says outright, I am contemplating divorce. Now, he baby pleases, and he's like, I'll do anything, and I'll just prove to you. And once that 18-month hold is up on my business account, I'll give you all that money. I swear to God, I'll give you all that money. I'll give crypto his money back, and I can pay for both of the weddings, build our financial foundation from there. And she's like, okay. Okay. I'm beating a dead horse. Whatever. Speaking of those weddings, plural, she finds out from her mother that he had agreed to pay for both weddings. Now, originally, it was understood that her parents would traditionally pay for the traditional Nigerian wedding, and they were more than happy to do so. But he went to them and said, no, I'll pay for both. I guess wanting to flex or whatever, didn't want to put too much financial burden on them. But you have 34 cents. How are you paying for anything? And he's like, no, I want to pay for it. And she gets mad. She's like, we don't have any money. We don't have any wiggle room. We have no extra money. They make a lot of money together. If she, whatever her real estate is doing now, she was able to get it going a little bit. And he again makes nearly $500,000 a year. So they're making money, but they're spending it just as quickly as they make it. She's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, well, at least let me pay $10,000. So that was their compromise. He's like, I'll at least pay $10,000. They travel. Spain, Denmark, Portugal. I'm just skipping through that. And somewhere around then, after all of that, he finally decides to sell the rest of his $70,000 watches. Girl, if she's not gonna ask, I'm not gonna either. F off. May, her birthday, she decides, and this is why it's hard to talk about this story, because it's hard to completely avoid victim blaming. It's difficult. She's made it difficult to give a because she says, I want him to build up some credit. So I put him on my credit card so that he can build up his credit. This bitch is stupid. I'm sorry. I keep saying maybe she's a little naive. Maybe the bitch is dumb. I don't know what to say other than that. I try so hard to not, but I can't fathom a person who has lied to you. You have now caught them lying over and over. He has an addiction to spending money. And you said, I'm gonna put this on my credit card. And shocker, she is looking at the balance of the card and suddenly there's a $7,000 cash advance. She's like, what is this? And this is the first time he would outright admit he's been gambling again. She's hurt and she's disappointed and sad, but at least he's honest this time. And so she's a bit softer with him about that. And it's like, ugh. She goes to the Bahamas. She goes to the Bahamas for a bachelorette trip for her friend. Okay. And while she's there, he has that IRS hearing. I don't remember which account this was to open up. Honestly, the minutia is bogging me down. But essentially, he's able to get into account and she's really happy. She's like, oh my God. And he's really happy. He's like, I thought I had 200,000, but it's actually 300,000 in there. Says she wants proof of him talking to the bank. He sends that over. She follows the number that called. She puts the number in chat GPT. I'm not trying to be rude, but that does explain a lot. Am I going to expound on that in any way? No, those that get it, and the girls that don't. But she's able to tell that that phone number is, in fact, connected to a Danish bank. So yes, he was talking to a bank. He starts telling the mom that he will send the $10,000 for the wedding. And as I understand it, the mom had already paid some money, but he was saying that he would pay them back. Why she would even let her parents. Okay. She wouldn't be doing all this for it. I'm sorry. She just wouldn't. But when it's time for that money to come through, it's not there. Weird. So weird. That just keeps happening. That's crazy. But again, she doesn't think anything of it. I'm gonna need you to start thinking something of it. Holy shit. Speaking of holy shit. Now unable, or there's some issue with this bank account, to pay her $10,000. Her mama did $10,000. Suddenly, he's really interested in learning about the word of God. I think it's pretty blaringly obvious, but again, I have religious trauma, but it's pretty obvious that Onyeka is in the church. Just the way that she acts. There's certain aspects of the church that is giving very sheltered church girl. Him just dangling the prospect that maybe I would like to become closer to the word of God. She's ecstatic. And I'm like, of course you do. Of course you want to get closer to God, you fart face bitch. Of course you do. But that money still hasn't come through. Ironically, he tells her he wants to get closer to God the day before the money was supposed to come through. Neither here nor there. She confronts him. She's like, what the It's always something. And he flips it on her saying that at this point, you always think I'm lying, so why should I say anything? He leaves her, blows off steam. Finally, she starts to ask herself, what if everything is a lie? Just now. She starts playing around with the Danish money app, think Danish Venmo or something like that. And as she's playing around with it, she realizes that he had actually cropped out the schedule payment button from a screenshot that he had sent her as proof that he had already sent the money to her mom, but for some reason it just wasn't showing up. I don't know why. That's crazy. She confronts him. He continues to lie, but his lies are getting worse because she's actually finally accepting that maybe he's a liar. So he storms out. And then the thing that's pretty wild to me, but also pretty on brand for a piece of shit like this type of guy, he calls off the weddings. Saying, I don't know, man. We're not a team. I'll pay your mom and I'll pay you back, but I'm done. I'm going back to Denmark. So he starts packing. He got a plane ride. He's ready to go. She admits that she steals his passport. I don't know if this is my avoidance. I don't know, but I could not fathom that. That's some shit I could never imagine doing. Whoa. I could not imagine begging. I mean, that's such an end of the sentence. I don't want to be with you. He's like, I'm going back home. I'm done. And when he says I'm done, he means like he wants things over. He wants a divorce. Like the closest thing I remember is like one time this one guy was like trying to break up with me, but doing it in a way that was definitely like in an effort to make me feel bad more so than actually breaking up with me. And I really liked him. It was still very early. I didn't know he was a piece of shit yet. And I was like, that's unfortunate. That makes me sad. I wish you would give us more of a chance, but okay. Like that's all you can do. I can't imagine grabbing this by the lapel and being like, you won't leave me. He's like, this, I'm going back to Denmark and I just got a job that makes $1 million a year. And she's like, it's just the addiction talking. I know this is insane, but I don't want him to go for some reason. And it's funny because she says for some reason and then gives explicitly what the reason is. She had been considering life without him. Again, she had been contemplating what divorce might look like. The concept that he was breaking up with her, she couldn't accept. And bitch, I'm prideful too. I'm prideful in the other direction. I'd be like, bitch, you want to break up with me? F you. Go, bitch. The f and then cry about it later. But the concept of him breaking up with me put me in fight or flight. And so I was fighting. I wanted to fight for us. But he's pretty overt. He's like, I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to see you anymore. I'll pay you back your monies. Like, I'd never want to talk to you evermore. Why did I turn into Poe? And he packs all his stuff and he leaves for good. She was out at work when he left. So when she got home and saw that he was completely gone, she texts him begging him not to go. And she's like, I have your passport. I took your passport. He's pissed. Honestly, I get why. And he's like, now I have to pay for a temp passport. Thanks for just making this more difficult for me. And he's like, well, now that we're not together, you always prioritize your friends and family more than me. So now you can tell them everything. And so she tells him everything. He was the one that was kind of saying, please don't tell about my addiction and blah, blah, blah. But now she's like, F it. So she tells her sisters and they console her. She finds out that he had borrowed $3,000 from her little sister, borrowed money from her twice, and he had paid her back once with interest. He said that he was going to try to buy Onyeka some really nice birthday gift, and he borrowed $3,000 from her and never paid her back. I don't know what gift is $3,000, and if it needs to be $3,000, if you can't afford it, you shouldn't get it. Also, apparently she didn't even get a birthday gift that year. So, and also something Danish account, something Nigerian wedding, something I need the money and whatever. Something about realizing that he had borrowed money, well, stolen money from her little sister breaks the spell, so she says, and now she's furious. She realizes, oh my God, she can't be the only person. So as he's going back to Denmark, she's texting him that she's reaching out to all these people, and she finds out that he had scammed so many people around her. And I will give this, she's dumb as but he must also be really good at his job, because there's no way in hell. How did you get so many people to give you money? Because apparently he had borrowed from her friend Rob twice, once for an Aston Martin car. You don't need a luxury vehicle, let alone to the extent that you're reaching out to people like, hey, can you give me some money so I can get an Aston Martin? No, bitch, you can't get a Ford. You can't drive a Hyundai. At some point, he may or may not have paid that back. Then he borrowed from her friend Rob and Chris for a rare Rolex for the wedding. And for some reason, they gave him money for that. He asked for money from a high school friend of hers, her cousin, something about a Ferrari. Again, you can't buy your own Ferrari, then you shouldn't have a fucking Ferrari. He borrowed $10,000 from another friend of hers, $10,000 from her coworker's husband. He borrowed money from her father, who she would tell all about all of this stuff. And that's when she had to admit to them that they were already married and were now getting divorced. So that was a lot, I'm sure. And apparently he'd also borrowed from his mentor, more on him in a second. He had borrowed $30,000 from him. Eventually she ends up talking to both of his sisters. The younger one that he's on somewhat better terms with would say like, yeah, he had a really bad addiction 10 years ago, but he seems to have gotten better, but it seems that he's struggling again. Onyeka then asks about the royal title, which I didn't even know we were still thinking that was real. If you thought the Olympics was fake, you thought his f***ing crown or whatever, okay, whatever. I'm so sorry. I'm trying. I'm trying. The sister is like horrified because she's like, bitch, what? Again, I looked at her horrified too. I'm like, we still believe in this one? And then she talks to the older sister who reaches out to Onyeka first. And she was like, yes, I figured he was gambling again. Again, they're not on good terms, him and this sister. Probably because she don't take his bullshit, don't enable this. She was like, I could tell he was living above his means again, which is usually a good sign that he's gambling. She then goes into more specifics about 10 years ago, because apparently 10 years ago, it had gotten really, really bad. He went to treatment at the treatment center whose job it is to treat people with gambling addiction. He was the worst case they had ever seen. He had gotten really involved with some dangerous loan shark people and they wanted their money back. So they threw a brick into their parents' home, into their window, and chased one of his friends down the street with a knife. His sister is a cop and was able to do something to meet up with these dangerous loan shark people to set up a payment plan. But before he could pay them back, he decided to flee to China, where he would get a job in Shanghai and then start ripping off people in Shanghai. I ain't gonna lie, that's funny. How do you start ripping off and you don't know the language? Ripping off and there's a language barrier is wild. I assume there were people that spoke English at his job, but still, it's just like, what? He would get treatment, and they were like, he seems to be fine. She also clarified some other things, which again, I'm surprised that we needed to clarify this, but okay. She's like, no, we're not a rich family. We don't have a title. We're a middle-class family. She also tells her that he's never owned property in Denmark, ever. So all that shit about taxes and things are up at the apartment and I need this, that, and the other because there's things going on. Someone's buying the apartment. He's never owned any buildings. Who knows? I assume gambling. That's a lot of gambling. He was asked for $250,000 from $250,000, $200,000. And Onyeka, at any chance she has to piss me off. Because again, I'm starting to feel sympathy for her because she's been lied to so much. But in the midst of his family telling her all these things, she starts to blame them for not telling her about it. And I'm like, she's never blamed her husband for not telling her about it, really, except for the initial shock of finding it out. But since then, she's very much so like, it's the addiction. It's the addiction. And she's very like, you guys should have told me. You didn't tell me. And I'm like, that's your husband. He's a grown man. He should have told you. What you coming at us for? Also, he had told them that he told you that he was being honest with you and you accepted him as he was. So what the were they supposed to do? So now she's like, let me unblock the ex that he wanted me to block and I'll talk to her. This is where she gets the lowdown that they were not together for 4 years. Like he said, they were together for 7. And that also they didn't stop dating until 4 months into the relationship that he had with Onyeka. So basically that whole time that he was talking about like, oh, he can't come over because his back hurts and like dad's in the hospital. He may or may not have been in the hospital, but regardless, it was because he was living with her. So he couldn't just leave without her thinking something was up. The ex dumped him because she was like, I just realized he never was going to change and it was just a mess. By the time she dumps him, that's the 4-month mark where he's talking about marriage and whatnot with Onyeka. Crazy work. Him being a cheater though is the least surprising part of all of this to me though. I just don't believe that a person that lies this much would not also be a cheater because like wasted effort, man. You might as well. You lie about everything else. So, and then she reaches out to the mentor. This man is a man they had befriended along with his wife, who's Danish, and there's so few Danes in the Dallas area. So they ended up striking up a friendship. This man is very, very wealthy. He's a businessman. He's a lot more diligent than anyone else that he had interacted with up until this point or in the orbit of Onyeka and her family and friends. But he still got $30,000 out of him. Something about a land investment. Doesn't really matter. But essentially, he had gone to 10 to 15 meetings with this man, and the man had collected collateral, and he had still somehow gotten $30,000 from him. The collateral he collected were the watches, which are not real. Also the least surprising part of it. Like, him being a cheater and having fake watches makes a whole lot of sense to me. But the one part of this conversation that did stun me was when she said to this mentor, why didn't you say anything about it to me? And he says, well, Onyeka, you're Nigerian. It's the scamming capital of the world. I thought you were in on it. And as wild as that statement is, her response, even wilder. You know, I was going to paraphrase what she said. I'm going to let her say it. I'm going to let her say it so I don't put no words in her mouth. This is her response to that obscenely racist statement.
You're Nigerian. Like, that's a scamming capital of the world. I didn't know if you were in on it. And that's when the irony hit me. I'm Nigerian and I'm a proud Nigerian. I tell people it's my biggest flex, but the country's not perfect. We have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. But one of our weaknesses is that there's a ton of scammers versus Denmark, who's considered to be this prestigious, wealthy, happy country. So the fact that a Danish man pulled this over on a Nigerian or Nigerians collectively blew my mind.
She didn't take what I thought she was going to take from that. What do they have to do? Call you a hard R for you to hear racism? Like, going back to the other conversations we were having about whiteness and this esteem for whiteness, her proximity to whiteness and her fetish, honestly, for it. And also her need to have timid, I guess, pride about being Nigerian, despite her saying like, I'm so proud to be Nigerian. I'm so part of these things and it's so great to be Nigerian. But she seems to be nervous about his interacting with her Nigerianness and seems to have a very low bar for what it means to accept her and her culture. The fact that what she came from this was more so a pretty overt shame of being Nigerian. And the only thing she got from it was the irony that this rich white man was able to pull things over on the scammers of the world. She just essentially affirmed they're the scammers of the world. It is particular. He would also tell her that he had filed a lawsuit against him 3 months prior to this, which she did not know about. Now he's back in Denmark. So I guess he's not getting that money either. So off. So she's reaching out like, this person, are you serious? I don't ever want to talk to you ever again. Finally, she got there eventually. And at some point he starts spamming her back, trying to get her back. They always do. I guess he ran out of marks, but as she's reading his stuff, she's like, most of this came from ChatGPT. And honestly, if I had been consulting with ChatGPT this whole time, you know, he would have told me what to do. Did we learn nothing from Kendra? Please stop going to ChatGPT for major life advice. Get a therapist. I think she has a therapist now. She mentioned therapy. Focus on that. We're almost done, I swear. She goes through with filing divorce, which shocks him. I guess, again, he didn't expect her to do that. So he starts begging for her back even more. Starts sending voice notes about how he's going crazy and now he can't be without her and yada, 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 and how he's going to show up. Now, he was in Copenhagen. At some point, he had, I think, moved back to Dallas semi-permanently. So he shows up and she screams bloody murder to get the f*** out of here. And this is the last time they would see each other. But it's not the last time she would hear of him, because eventually she would get a text message from a friend of hers who would say that they had seen him out and about with a woman who, as much as one can perceive, they think she is a woman of the night. She is perceived to be a sex worker. I don't really know why this particular offense seemed to bother her so much. Like, they're not together. Whoever he's having sex with is none of her business. And she doesn't seem to have any concerns about him having sex with other women in regards to like safety. Like, oh, has he been sleeping with a bunch of other women, sex workers or non-sex workers or whatever? Like, for my own well-being, I should know that. No, she's like, a prostitute? You're f***ing a prostitute? You know, people around here know me.
Let me just say, based on the way she was described to me, I would think she was a street hooker, 100%. People know me in Dallas and they're gonna see him with a hooker, and it's just so disrespectful to me. And I'm like, after everything you've done, like, you're still going, you're still not finished.
You're f***ing a prostitute? That is, and I quote, 1 out of 10.
It was also kind of communicated to me that she might be like a 1 out of 10. And
one thing this bitch don't know how to do is prioritize. And she harps on it. She gets very like, a sex worker. And then I found out that she was $40 apparently. And it's like, you know, people are good. Like, you just have to embarrass me. People don't know that we're over yet. And now you're out here with a hooker.
I was not buying sex last night. I was buying weed. I can't believe Anyeka would ever think I'd be with a prostitute. That girl was actually a doctor.
I already knew what you were, but I really know what you are. I know what you are. Found out I was right. Because to her, it's like, you were with me, and the person you think on par with me is a 1 out of 10 prostitute. And now all my friends have seen you with a 1 out of 10 prostitute. She seems really hung up on that. Anyway, long story short, she announces their divorce. Her friend Chris is able to get him to sign the divorce paper, and they are divorced and finalized as of November 4th, aka less than a month as of filming this. And she posted that like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So first critique, I would say you really should have sat with it. You really should have sat with those feelings, and maybe you would have been able to have some more insight and would realize how non-sympathetic you presented all of this. He's a terrible person. He's a liar. He's a manipulator. He's obviously doing this with the intention to scheme. I am not ignoring that. That is terrible. That is deplorable behavior. But we know about this because of this woman presenting it. And the fact that at no point does she say anything like, I really shouldn't have been going on these trips. I really shouldn't have put him on my credit card. I really should have asked myself, am I doing this partially because I have this fairy tale idea of relationships and not because that's who he really is? At no point is she contemplating any part of her life at all. She is just on the receiving end of his manipulation, supposedly. And that's just not what the story is that she presented. With that said, I do have compassion for her. She comes off very self-hating by way of survival, like being in a PWA and like downplaying herself and her blackness, and then trying to like realize that it doesn't look good to say you're ashamed of your blackness. So now I have to do all these things to act like I'm not ashamed of my blackness. But here's this white man that is all my fetishes and all the things that I want and yada, yada, yada. And him, maybe to some degree, could feel, maybe not particularly because she's a black woman, but maybe particularly because she is a black woman who's on a quest for white validation. He could hone in on that and he could appeal to all of those ideas and fantasies. She believes that he's a fucking prince or whatever. She's a naive woman with money who wants to believe in this fantasy and has been denied this fantasy. With that said, I have such a finite amount of patience for this because a lot of this is just sheer stupidity. And girl, we're damn near the same age. You're 31, I'm 30. And I had a similar like experience as her in the sense that I wasn't a big dater prior to that. And I made some humiliating mistakes. It's life. You live, you learn, you blah, blah, blah. But some of those L's can be taken in secret. And if you're going to present your L's, at least present it as a learning experience, which she does not do. At the end of this, I don't feel like that she's learned anything from this, that she gained anything from this other than a story that she can now market to nosy bitches like me. And that also doesn't put a great taste in your mouth. With that said, there's also stuff people are saying that she's, for all intents and purposes, appears to be a black Republican. Also, least surprising thing to me, because again, all of this gives that to me. So yeah, there's that. And that's kind of my final thoughts. And I'm going to end this video, by the way, with a running travel list, just because I have to, not including the places they went for work or like meeting in Croatia. They went to Dallas and Denmark back and forth like 12 times. They went to Monaco, Saint-Tropez, Cannes. She went to Charlotte, New York, Boston, Paris, Oklahoma, Cabo, Nigeria, Portugal twice, Miami, Budapest, Colombia, Panama, Key West, and the Bahamas. This is not including the places, again, that they went for business. He went to Norway a few times and yada, yada, yada. And sometimes they went to one place and ended up in Denmark and blah, 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 that whole thing. But in the midst of financial trials and a known gambling addiction at some point, they was still traveling. It's really hard to feel sympathy for being broke. Y'all be traveling like a motherfucker, but how do you do it? What is your skills other than going into exorbitant amounts of debts? Do you clip coupons? I would love to find a coupon. I want to go to Panama for 40 bucks. That would be great. Again, she saddens me. Two circumstances of TikTok drama saddening me because it's just so much insecurity that would be involved in something like this. I really hope that it does result in some introspection and growth and whatnot, but I don't see that, especially in regards to the self-hatred. The people who are calling her out the most on that component are black women, because we're the people that can smell it. It's so obvious. It's so blaringly obvious. But because we're the people that can see it most likely, she thinks of us as her main antagonists. And at least for me, I'm not your antagonist, but I called you stupid a lot. But some people it's a descriptor. You did dumb things. You were doing stupid things. And you might be a little dumb. But at the end of the day, if that can be remedied, if you can learn some shit, that'd be great. As for the man, get and I am happy that people know that he's a terrible person. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think people should be warned about that. I just wish it were done in a way that felt like we got somewhere, because I really don't think it feels like we did. The story just ended. If he hadn't broken up with her, they'd be still flying somewhere. He didn't go back that one time and say, it's over, I don't want to be with you anymore. They'd still be flying to the moon and whatever the But those are my thoughts. And I've been sitting here for a very long time and I want sushi. So I'm going to leave you guys here. If you like this video, feel free to like this video. Follow me on social media, Instagram, Bluesky, both of which are KennieJD, as well as become a member of the channel. I did some not so subtle sneak peeks of the merch coming up. It's a cute picture of my dog in one of the shirts. If you would like to get exclusive member posts or just want to support the channel, feel free to become a member. You also should be getting discounts when the merch is out. And I will see you guys next time.